Welcome, folks. We'll be getting started in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to launch a poll. If you could let us know how many people are watching from your household today, that's very helpful to us. I'm getting us queued up on YouTube as well, so our friends over there can watch us. And keep an eye on your inbox. The recipes should be there. If they're not there, I will resend them again shortly. All right, so we'll get started in just about 4 minutes. So thank you for your patience, everyone.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. I think you can all hear me, but I can't hear you. So hello. Yeah, so we're going to be. I assume everyone can hear me now.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to be making a kale salad today, and we're going to be making some poached halibut, and I've got some really interesting techniques to show you besides the cooking itself. So some really interesting techniques that we use in the field. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight.
This is quite exciting. We haven't been able to do it like this before, where you can see like an up close and personal view of the chops and the cuts and everything that our chef is doing. So one of the benefits of Zoom that we're going to experience tonight.
Yeah. Yes. And the benefit of my lovely wife, Karen. So.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you all here.
Yes, she's working the camera.
We haven't been able to do it like this before, where you can see like an up close.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Oh, Annie, are you still there? Yeah.
Yes.
Because your sound cut out in, like right in the middle of the sentence.
Yes, it was because it was going live on YouTube, and then it starts playing the audio from that. So that's why we started ahead of time, so that we can.
You've got all the technology going.
Yes. So welcome if you're joining us on YouTube. If you are with us in Zoom, we just ask that you fill out that poll before we get started. We've got about 2 minutes left, and I'll be sending the recipes again once we get started. So you'll have those in your email if you have registered for the program. One more minute.
It's too bad we can't have everyone going, "Hi, Chris, how are you? Hey, Annie, how's it going tonight? Hey."
Please feel free to use the chat today. That's helpful. You can put your questions in there. It is 7 p.m., so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Annie Thielmann. I am the Adult Program Coordinator here at the Schaumburg Library. Tonight we've got Chef Chris with us. He's going to be preparing a yummy meal. We're going to be making harvest salad and halibut tonight. So this is going to work a little bit differently than some of our traditional programs. You are free to ask questions in the middle of a program. So if you see something that he's cutting or doing that you would like a little more information on, I am going to remain active, and I can see the chat box and the Q&A. The Q&A is a little bit easier for us to manage. So if you want to put your questions in that Q&A box, and if you have any and you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and use that chat, and I'll be monitoring that over there as well. So feel free to ask questions and interact during the program, and we'll be able to shout those out. So I'll do my best to get to it as promptly as possible, but we may wait and kind of let him finish a task that he's doing as he's doing it. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and I'm going to pass it over to Chris and spotlight his video so that you can see what he's doing at all times rather than my lovely face. All right, here we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Thielman. It is wonderful to be here with you tonight in my kitchen. So just a very, very, very quick note about myself. I taught at the College of DuPage for the last 32 years. I retired last year after 32 years teaching culinary and pastry arts. And previous to that, I was in the field for about 13 years. So I've spent my entire working life, 45 years, working in the hospitality field outside of Chicago here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to start with our kale salad. Okay. Now the kale salad, hopefully you all have the recipe in front of you. If not, that's okay, because I've got everything ready to go just right according to the recipe so that you can duplicate everything I'm doing. So we've got in the dressing maple syrup. Okay. We also have some cider vinegar that we're going to put in. All right. And I've got these little handy dandy spatulas. If you don't own one of these, I really recommend them because, as you can see, they are great for small quantities of product. Okay. And now I'm going to switch over to a wire whip. And remember, again, this is maple syrup, cider vinegar, apple cider vinegar, a little Dijon mustard, and now olive oil. Okay. So the maple syrup and the apple cider vinegar are going along with the butternut squash and the apples in this recipe. So let's say that you wanted to make this identical recipe and you didn't have any apple cider vinegar, but you had regular vinegar. Use that. It's fine. It's not a problem at all. Because a lot of times people will buy like a whole bottle of something and they need like a tablespoon, but they had something they could have substituted. So often you can make substitutions and it'll still be great and it'll taste wonderful. So please substitute, no problem. Okay, so we have our dressing ready to go. And remember, everybody, I made this recipe for 4 people. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to make 4 plates. I'm just going to make 1 plate, but the measurements in your recipe are enough for 4 people. Okay, all right. So we've got kale that I already prepared. Okay. Now, this evening, what I'm going to be doing, besides cooking and putting these things together, is I'm going to be showing you how to accomplish some of these tasks. For example, I've got 1 kale, but I've got it all prepared right here because you don't need to sit there and watch me peel kale, kale after kale after kale. So here's what you do. So all you do, I think it's easier to turn it around and you just pull it off the stem. If you notice, I'm just holding onto the stem and I'm doing it really slowly. So you just pull it right off the stem. And so you have the stem left over, and I know of nothing you can use this for. So if somebody comes up with something that you can use kale stems for, let me know, because I still can't come up with anything yet. So I just get rid of it. All right. So now you're going to take your kale and you are going to rip it into small pieces. Okay. So could you cut it with a knife? Of course. Could you rip it like this into small pieces? Sure. It doesn't really matter. As long as you get them in bite-sized pieces, okay? Because after the salad is done, it's really difficult to then cut it into bite-sized pieces. But right now, it's really simple and easy. Okay. All right. So now here is the interesting part of the salad. I think personally, one of the most interesting parts. You're going to take the kale, okay, and this is basically 1 large bunch, and you're going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. And if you notice, I have my olive oil in a handy dandy little squeeze bottle, and just like you saw, it was nothing at all to do it. So if you have one of those little olive oil dispensers, they work really good. Now, what we have to do is literally massage the kale. Here, let me show you. See how it looks dry right now and kind of rough, okay? So in about 2 to 3 minutes, you're going to notice that the kale is going to be shiny all over, and it's also going to soften up. So basically what I'm doing right now is I am softening the kale tremendously. One of the things that I personally never liked about kale in its raw shape was that it was really on the rough side when you ate it. And so when you massage the kale like this, and literally I'm just rubbing and squeezing the kale, it is making it nice and soft. And when you eat this salad, you'll go, wow, it's almost like lettuce. It's really, really nice and soft. Okay. So another 1 more minute and then we'll be ready to go. Also, if you notice, I put some gloves on. because I'm going to be working with my knife the rest of the evening, and I don't want my hands slipping around, as well as, you know, it's a little more sanitary. But if your hands are really, really, really clean, you know, it's not a problem. Okay. See how it's changing? See how the kale's getting really shiny? Okay. And I only put on like a tablespoon of olive oil, hardly any olive oil at all. This is, I would say this is about halfway done. So remember, we also have to cut the Honeycrisp apple. I'm going to show you a technique in case you do not have an apple core. And I'm going to show you how to cut the butternut squash, because butternut squash can be a little tricky to cut. So I'm going to show you a trick of the trade on the butternut squash also. Okay. All right. So this, in fact, let me try a piece. A little more. You can literally taste, if you want to, taste a piece in the beginning, do this technique, and then taste a piece at the end, and you go, wow, it's really different. It's almost done. Just a little more. Kale is a wonderful source of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. I'm sure everybody knows that. It's like a new superfood these days. Okay, there we go. All right, so you can see how it's, well, the volume has gone down, what would you say, probably 30, 40%. The kale is really shiny, and it's much, much softer, which you can tell when, and you can tell probably just by looking at it that it looks very, very different. Okay? All right. So now let me take these gloves off. Okay. Now, next part. And we'll put together the salad at the very end. Okay, we need a Honeycrisp apple. And let me grab a little water because the kale. Okay, so here's a technique for cutting an apple if you do not have an apple core. Okay, if you have an apple core, it works great. Right down the middle, good to go. If you don't have one, take your knife, cut it in half. Okay, then lay it over like this, cut it in half again, just like that. And I'll separate this so you can see what my knife is going to do. Hold this on a slight angle, and you get rid of the core. Okay, just like that. See how the core comes right out. So remember, cut it right in half. And again, there we go. And then one more time. Okay. So this technique works really well if you do not have an apple core. Because as you can see, I have this apple pretty much ready to go in just a few seconds. Okay, next thing. Please notice that I did not peel the apples. So I didn't peel them because I like how that red with the inner, light green color looks on the salad. So I left them on purpose like this. So as you can see, I'm going to cut them into small bite-sized pieces. So one of the things that we always try to do in the industry is think about how is the guest going to eat the food. So for example, you can see that I've got pieces that are relatively small that will fit right on a fork so that when you're eating the salad, it's not too big, okay? All right. Okay. So an apple. And again, one apple for this whole bowl for 4 people will work great. Okay, next, butternut squash. All right, in fact, let me move my apples over, everybody. All right, on the butternut squash, I personally think the butternut squash for this recipe goes really, really nicely. If you can't get your hands on it and there's acorn squash, that'll work great. Spaghetti squash, isn't going to work because it literally looks like spaghetti and it won't present very well on the salad. So anything but spaghetti squash in the squash family should work just great. All right, so here's our butternut squash. Butternut squash always has a top that's kind of cylindrical, and then it kind of flares out on the bottom. So why that's important is when you are prepping it, if you cut it right about here, okay, you can see this is relatively straight. And if you can hear our dog barking, that is Lily. And so now we have to get rid of the outside. Okay. So a butternut squash is fairly tough. Now, everybody, if you didn't notice how I changed the position of my hand on the knife. See how I put my thumb here instead of like normally you'd have here? That's because I want to make sure the knife doesn't slip, and it gives me just a little extra leverage. Okay. Great. And also, butternut squash is slightly slippery, so make sure you get a really good grip on this thing so it doesn't slip. And incidentally, my knife is really, really sharp. You can see how much problem I was having cutting that. And that's a really sharp knife. So butternut squash is on the tough side. So make sure your knife is as sharp as it can be, and really use good technique like I was just showing you. Okay. Next, we are going to cut down approximately 1/2-inch slices. Okay. And again, I've got the squash ready to go. So I'm going to make little planks, if you will. And I'm going to, and again, I'm doing this nice and slowly so everybody can see very clearly. And then turn it sideways. And the butternut squash that you see this size will shrink just a little teeny bit in the oven, not a crazy amount, just a little teeny bit. It's not going to shrink a real lot. So if you personally prefer this, the pieces to be a little larger, a little smaller, just take that into account. Okay. All right. And one butternut squash, everybody, is probably pretty good, probably just a little bit too much, but you really can't buy less than one butternut squash at the store. So I have a good idea for what to do with the excess as soon as I'm done cutting. Because chefs really, really don't like to waste food. And so we find all kinds of uses for things that we have left over. Okay. All right. Okay. So this butternut squash is ready to go in the oven. Now, what you do is, my bowl's over here. Hold on, let me grab my bowl. You're going to take your butternut squash and you are going to put it in a bowl. And again, if you want to just put the olive oil right on it on the pan, that'll work too. So I'm just going to, a little bit of olive oil and literally toss it. And of course, we need some salt. I'm a big fan of sel de Guérande, which is a fleur de sel from France. Personally, I use that all the time. So that's what I use all the time. Fleur de sel, flower of the sea. Okay. Sorry, flower of the salt, salt flower. It's from the top when they're harvesting the salt. This is ready. Okay, next thing I would like to show you is this. In the industry, and I'll get back, don't worry, I'm going to get back to that. In the industry, we have some basic size pans that we use all the time. This is one of them. This is called a half size sheet pan. It's 18 inches by 13 inches. In the industry, this is a standard size. So if I say, hey, I need some half pans, we all know this is the size you're talking about. The full size pan is literally two of them right next to each other. So that's how you have half and full size. You need to bake this on something. So this is a silicone baking sheet. And you can see it fits exactly in the bottom of the pan. I got these on Amazon years ago. Or you could use a piece of parchment paper. Either one. I heavily recommend you do not bake directly on the pan because your butternut squash will stick really badly and you'll be really irritated. So use either a silicone baking sheet or a piece of parchment paper. One of the two, either one will work great. Okay? All right. And so then you take your butternut squash and you put it on there, spread it out just a little bit, and then you pop this in the oven at 425 degrees for 45 minutes. Of course, I already have ours ready to go. So I baked it right before we started. So as you can see, the butternut squash has just got a little bit of browning on it, not a lot, just a little bit here and there. I think it adds a nice, interesting caramelization note to the salad. Okay, and so you can see it shrunk just a little bit, and they're fully cooked. It was 425 degrees for 45 minutes. Okay, all right. All right, so back to this. I make a butternut squash soup recipe, which consists of butternut squash, cauliflower, potatoes, and chicken stock. Literally, that's all that's in there. You throw it all in a pot, you cook it for like 30 to 45 minutes, puree it in a blender, and you have an awesome butternut squash soup. Okay, so if you have leftover, that's what I recommend. If you wanted to keep cutting all of this, no problem at all. But I personally like to use this as a soup, especially with winter coming. I think it's a great winter soup. Okay, all right. All right, so let's put together our salad. Okay, my friends. Now, I'm going to build one really large salad. You could put it on a big platter and then put everything on, put it in the middle of the table for the family. But I'm just going to build one, okay? So I'm going to put on our kale. And I'd say that's a very healthy single serving. All right, very healthy. And then we need to garnish with our items. Okay, so we've got our roasted butternut squash. Okay, and we have our Honeycrisp apples. I would say for the salad, just a couple more pieces and that's enough. You don't want to have it overpowering. And then there's two more things in this recipe. There are dried cranberries, okay? And the dried cranberries add a really nice sweetness. They're not really hard, but they're not really, really soft either, so they add an interesting texture. And some pecans. All right. Okay, on the pecans, and believe it or not, these are chopped pecans. They actually are slightly chopped. And if you think they're a little too big, you can just literally squeeze it in your fingers and break it up a touch. Or do that with a little bit. Okay, all right. Now, our last thing is the dressing. So, oh, I'm sorry, I almost forgot. On the pecans, I wanted to tell everybody. In the industry, when we are using nuts, macadamia nuts, hazelnuts, pecans, almonds, we will often toast them in the oven for 10 minutes or so at like 350, 375. It brings out the flavor of some nuts more. In this particular case, the pecans, I don't think it's necessary, okay? Hazelnut really is necessary. If you taste a raw hazelnut, taste a toasted hazelnut, you go, wow, what a difference. Same thing with almonds. But in the pecans, I don't think it's really necessary to toast them, so that's why I didn't. Okay, next, we have our dressing. So we're gonna make sure our dressing, again, is nicely stirred up. So you get all the flavors. Okay, and if you wanted to take the dressing and throw it on the greens and then build, that'll be fine. But I kind of like this because I'm hitting the product with some of the dressing, the apples, the pecans, etc. So besides the lettuce, I'm actually getting it on the different components. So for our harvest salad, there you go. So remember, everyone, the key point for the kale is to massage it for about 2 or 3 minutes with just a little bit of olive oil. And then I roasted the butternut squash at 425 for about 45 minutes in the oven. And then added some Honeycrisp apples, some dried cranberries, and some pecans. Honeycrisp apples, also, everyone, another reason I really like Honeycrisp apples. See these that I cut, 5 minutes ago? These can stay in the fridge just like this because I did it just the other day. I forgot about them, and they did not oxidize. So one of the really interesting things about Honeycrisp apples is they don't oxidize. Or if they do, boy, it must take a week because I had them sitting in the fridge for days, and the color was just like this. So that means for you to prepare a salad ahead of time, you could do a lot of these components the day ahead, do the kale last minute, have everything else ready to go, and put this salad together in like 3 minutes. Okay. All right, great. Any questions so far as I rearrange a little bit here? Annie, any questions out there so far?
So far, we don't have any questions.
Okay.
In the chat, if you do have a question, please feel free to enter that now, and I'll go ahead and shout it out as we're making a transition.
Okay.
I actually have one. Why don't the Honeycrisp oxidize?
Yeah, well, the Honeycrisp apple was an apple that was engineered, if you will. So I'm sure that was one of the things that when they were trying to create the breed of apple, I'm sure that was one of the things that they were trying to do. A Fuji apple will work well. A Braeburn apple will work. But I like the Honeycrisp. I like Honeycrisp apples.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Let me move a couple things over here, everybody. So I'm not too crowded. Okay. So we have a whole bunch of interesting things to show you. So this recipe is going to use celery root, leeks, zucchini, carrots, but I think a couple of the interesting things are the celery root, also called celeriac, okay? This right here is celeriac peeled. In fact, right here, you can see what it looks like in its unpeeled state. And this is julienne of celeriac that I cut up again right before we started, okay? So on this, probably what I'd like to show you is how to peel it. All right. You can use a peeler, but it's much, much slower, okay? And so what you're gonna do with your knife, and you can see there's a fair amount of waste with celeriac, but these, I think this one piece of celeriac cost, I think like 60 cents. It was really inexpensive. Incidentally, I had to go to Whole Foods to purchase it. Jewel didn't have any. I didn't go to Mariano's, but I went to Whole Foods because they always have it in stock. Okay, so essentially, you're going to get rid of all of this part. Okay.
Chris, when you have a moment, we did get our first question.
Awesome. Go ahead. I'm just cutting.
They would like to know if you should cover apples if you were cutting them ahead of time and placing them in the fridge.
Yes, you should cover them in acidulated water. And then they're still going to oxidize a little bit, but it's going to be better. So acidulated water, a little lemon juice and water, because everyone generally has lemon juice. Okay, so now, just like you previously saw, you would take a slice. And again, this is like a large julienne. A fine julienne is about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. And this is a little bit larger than that. So this is probably 1/4 of an inch. And again, I already have some cut. So I was just giving you a quick demo. Okay. And a sharp knife is essential for this. This is really tough and fibrous. And without a sharp knife, it might slip, and we don't want you to cut yourself. Okay. So the celeriac is ready to go. Okay.
We got another question in regards to the celeriac. Is it a popular vegetable? This person has never used it.
In Europe, you see it a pretty good amount. Here in America, almost never. In fact, thank you for that question. You jogged something in my brain. Let's say that you've got all this celeriac left, okay? You can cut it up into whatever size, cook it in some chicken stock, just a little bit, drain it, or water if you want to drain it. You could use the chicken stock, and then puree it. Makes a really interesting root vegetable puree. So you could do that with the excess. So yeah, also another thing I wanted to tell you is, obviously this isn't celery, everyone, I know that. The celery that we all see at the store does not grow here to here. You know, the celery that we're all used to seeing, this is not that on the bottom. It's two totally separate plants. So celery root, also called celeriac, is grown for the bottom, and the celery, like you see at the store, you know, with the green stalks, is grown for the top. The bottom isn't used. So it's not the same exact plant. They're in the same family, but it's not the exact same plant. Okay. All right. Next is zucchini. We need some zucchini. So as the recipe says, you're going to use the outside only. So as you can see, I'm trying to keep all the green as much as possible. And you can see there's just hardly any left. Okay. All right. So then, just like before, we're going to cut these into thick matchsticks. The size is important to everyone because we need to make sure that everything cooks at the same rate. And so I'm making these like a large julienne, if you will. Okay. All right. Okay, these are ready to go.
We have another celeriac question when you've got a moment. Does it taste like celery?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Does it taste like celery? Celeriac?
Yeah, it tastes like a strong celery. The celery ribs are kind of, celery, but the celeriac has got a really nice, strong celery flavor. The only thing you have to remember is it's pretty tough and fibrous in its raw state. But this would make a darn interesting crudité dip with some ranch dressing. Okay, on the carrots, same thing, everyone. You're going to cut a flat side, and then you're going to make little planks. And again, then you're going to turn them, and you're going to cut. So you have a julienne, a rough julienne, a large julienne. Okay, all right, great. And again, you don't have to watch me cut carrots. Okay, leek. All right, on leeks. They are actually probably about this long, and you can see this one was cut off. Okay, at the store, and they didn't have any that were with the full top on, so not much I could do. So what I want to show you is this. See where this starts to turn green? Right about here, approximately. Okay, see how it splits right here? This is where you cut. This part on the top will take approximately 30 to 40 minutes of cooking time to get tender. Maybe even more. It takes a long time to get this part of a leek tender, okay? This part of the leek is very tender right from the get-go. See how it's more of a white color and that's more of a green color? So what you want to do is cut it again into a couple inches, okay? And then you're going to cut it in half. Now, here's the important part about a leek. Leeks are grown in very sandy soil. And here, let's say if we wanted to use this part too, we're going to get rid of the root end. Okay, we're not going to use all these leeks. I just want to demonstrate something. See how it has different layers? Okay, because this is grown in sandy soil, leeks have got to be washed before you use them 100% of the time. If you forget, you'll probably discover some sand in your food later, okay? Even though you really can't see any, what you need to do is give it a good wash. You could do it in a bowl of water. You could put it under some running water, but you've got to like kind of fan it out and kind of rinse. So I'll walk over to my sink and do it. It'll only take me like 3 seconds. Okay. Now, if you notice, I cut it in half and we need a julienne. So I kind of flattened it slightly. And then I just take the knife. And then we have a quick, fast, easy julienne with the leeks. Okay. All right, next, garlic. Incidentally, everyone, in case you're probably, maybe some of you are remarking to yourself, you're going, When I taught culinary and pastry arts for over 3 decades, I always thought it was important not only to teach people cooking techniques, which we're doing amongst this, but also techniques for working with some of the product. Because as you saw, maybe you've never cut a butternut squash before. And it's like, okay, well, how do I do this exactly? So that's why I'm showing you some of these techniques as we're going along. Okay, garlic. We need 1 clove of garlic for our recipe. So as you can see, it's still got the papery husk on the outside. So here's what you do. Give it just a slight smack with your knife. Okay, not too hard because you don't want to fly across the kitchen. And then you want to cut this little root end off right there. See the root end on the garlic? It's really tough. And so you want to cut that away. Okay. And then garlic has a tendency to roll around. So if you take your knife and give it a little harder hit, now it won't roll around on us. So now we're just going to take our knife and go back and forth in the garlic. Okay. Also wipe your knife off occasionally because garlic has a lot of natural oil and the garlic sticks to the knife. So you might have to do it like once, maybe twice. Just give it a quick wipe. Okay. All right, there we go. And for this recipe, if you want to make the garlic finer, you can, but it's not really necessary. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put this right in here with the leeks and the carrots and the celeriac because this is all going to go together in the pot anyways. So you can see this is ready to go. The zucchini is separate because this is not going in right away because this only needs a couple minutes of cooking. This needs about 5 minutes of cooking. All right. Now we have our vegetables ready. It is time for the halibut. Okay. So everyone, come on over to the stove, my friends. So we're going to turn the heat up. This is 2 cups of whole milk. And it should be exactly the right amount for this pot because I measured it earlier. So as you can see, I have the heat on super high just so the milk heats up quickly. If I wanted to have it on low to medium, that's fine. It'll just take an extra 5 minutes. And so since I want this milk to get hot quickly, I cranked it up, okay? If you want it to go a little faster, you could cover it, okay? And you can see here is our halibut. Each one of these is approximately 5 ounces. So this is probably a slightly smaller than a dinner portion, but I think it's probably a pretty good portion of fish, 5 ounces, okay? And this is halibut. So this recipe also needs a good sprinkle of salt in the milk for flavor, okay? This recipe for poaching with milk works really good for cod, turbot, sole, halibut. My personal opinion, you can poach salmon, you could poach tuna and swordfish in here, but I wouldn't. I think the fattiness of like swordfish, tuna, those kind of fishes, I think they're better grilled outside. I think that they really taste the best when they're grilled or sauteed. But this particular type of fish, like halibut, I think works really well for poaching. Okay. So this is heating up, and this will be about another, probably about a minute or so. And so one thing I want to point out to you, in case you're wondering why I wrote the recipe like I wrote it. Okay, we're going to get the milk really hot. We're going to drop the fish in. We're going to bring it back so it gets really hot, and then we're going to turn it down immediately. If you boil and boil and boil the fish, it'll probably break up the fish. So you don't want to break up the fish, meaning you don't want it to boil and boil and boil. So what we're going to do is put the fish in, cook it on a simmer for like 3 minutes, and then we're going to cover it, and then we're going to put it on the lowest possible heat so it just barely is staying hot. And in this case, that's about 180 degrees. Seafood, I used to be executive chef of a seafood restaurant in Glenview a long time ago in the 1980s. And seafood is done when it hits approximately 145 degrees. So we're going to have this poaching at about 180 to 190, which means it's going to cook very slowly and the heat is going to slowly penetrate into the fish, okay? One of the things that people do all the time, unfortunately, is they overcook their fish. And so often a lot of people don't like fish, and it might not be that the fish itself they don't like, but it might have been so overcooked so many times that people are just like, man, I just don't like fish. Okay. So you can see it's bubbling on the sides. It is just about there. Okay, there we go. See how it's starting to bubble on the sides? So what I'm going to do is take the fish and I'm going to drop it in. Okay. You need the milk to cover about 3/4 of the fish. Notice how it covered it all the way. That's okay. It's not a problem. So now I'm going to turn this down to really low. In fact, I'm going to switch the burner so I can make sure it's nice and low. Okay. All right, so remember, we need this. See how it's just barely simmering back there on the sides? We need this to come back to a simmer, okay? and then we're going to turn it down. Also, if you notice, I'm shaking it a little bit just because I want to make sure it's not sticking, and it's not sticking, but I just want to make sure. Okay, and it's not, so it's fine. Okay, you know what, I'm going to, that's good. Okay, so I don't forget, I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes so I don't forget about this because I'll be busy talking. It's like, oh, the fish. All right. So I set a timer for 3 minutes. I love timers. I highly recommend a timer. You'll be sitting watching TV going, oh, that's right, the potatoes. So set a timer. Okay. All right. Next, everyone, is our sauce. Okay. Our Vierge sauce. Time for your next interesting trick of the trade that I use personally when doing lemons or limes or oranges. Okay. How many of you out there? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
We've got another question when you got a chance.
Sure.
So should the flame be constant? Our stove has a keep warm setting where the flame turns on and off.
You know what you'd have to do in that case? You would have to take a thermometer and make sure it's staying at about 180, 190 degrees in that case. You'd have to, because I don't have a stove like that. I've never used a stove like that, which turns itself on and off, but that's what would be my recommendation. All right, I'm just checking my fish. Yep, looking good. Okay, great. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. You'd probably have to check out with a thermometer, make sure it's staying at around 180 to 190 approximately. Okay, how many of you out there, how many of you out there have a problem squeezing lemons to get all the juice out? Here is a trick that I picked up from when I taught dining room service classes, how to extract all the lemon juice with very, very little effort. First thing you do is take it and soften the lemon just a little bit. Okay, you've all probably seen that. You can see how the lemon's nice and soft now. Okay, then you're going to cut it in half. Got a leak left over on my knife. Okay. And you're going to take the fork and stick it in like this. I've got a strainer here because this is a two-handed operation. A lot of chefs will say, just squeeze it through your hand and catch the seeds. That's fine. But a lot of people have a problem getting all the juice out of that lemon. All right. So this is how you do it. Hold on. Let me check my fish. See, that's when I'm checking my fish. A little high. There we go. Ah, perfect. Okay. Ready, gang? Here we go. Take a strainer, and let me move my body so you guys can see the angle of this. See how the fork is this way? So what I'm going to do is literally squeeze and take the fork and go up and down at the same time. This way, you do not have to exert a superhuman amount of effort to squeeze the lemon. The fork going up and down squeezes just about every single ounce of juice out of there without a lot of effort. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So anyone remember what we do next on the recipe? Very, very, very low for about 5 minutes. That's right. Okay. So we have our lemon juice. Check this one more time. Okay. It's nice and low. Great. So we have our lemon juice. And for our Vierge sauce, okay. Vierge sauce is a sauce which was made famous by a gentleman by the name of Michel Girard. The name of his town is Eugénie-les-Bains. He has a restaurant, and the restaurant is called Michel Girard. He created the sauce in the 1980s. Now, the difference between his sauce and my sauce is his has tomatoes, mine doesn't. But basically, other than that, it's pretty much the same sauce. So what we need to do is make the sauce. But before that, I need to get our vegetables going because they need to cook while we're making the sauce because the sauce is very fast. Okay. So again, I'm going to turn the heat up on this and I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. And then remember, everyone, this is the carrots, celeriac, the leeks, and underneath is the garlic. Okay, so again, I'm only turning the heat up really hot just to get the pot going. Okay, so it's nice and hot because otherwise it'll take too long. And then we're going to take our vegetables and the garlic. and throw them in. So you can hear it sizzling ever so slightly. Okay. Now we need to sweat the vegetables. Sweating means these are cooked on very low heat without caramelizing or browning them. So you can hear how they're just starting to go. So now I'm going to take this and turn it down to a very low heat so that they do not cook and caramelize. This will take about 5 minutes, and then we're going to add the zucchini for 2 minutes, and then they're pretty much ready to go. Oh, I almost forgot my salt and pepper. Okay. Now, could you add a little white wine in here? No problem at all. Could you add a little butter in here? No problem at all. Could you add a little chicken stock? Of course. You can see the fish here, everyone. See how the fish is just barely cooking? See all the steam just barely cooking, which is what we want because we do not want it to cook really fast. It's just slowly, the heat is penetrating really slowly. All right, so this is going to be 5 minutes. So again, I am going to set my little handy dandy timer for 5 minutes so I don't forget. Okay. All right, and then remember, zucchini will go in, and then the vegetables will be ready to go. Okay, back to our Vierge sauce. We have the lemon juice, and then we have all these wonderful herbs. Some of them are from my garden. The chervil right here is from my garden. The lemon thyme, which is not in your recipe, but it looked beautiful. So I said to myself, let's just throw a little lemon thyme in there. Okay. So I think, there we go, just a little bit. If this was regular thyme, I wouldn't use it, but the lemon thyme has that lemon edge to the flavor. So I think it goes really well. We also have some dill, okay, fresh dill. And again, remember everyone, each of these is about 1.5 teaspoons, which is about half a tablespoon, okay? And then we have some parsley. And again, parsley is from my garden outside. I was thankful that it wasn't too cold and all the herbs self-destructed. And then we're gonna have some chives and we're gonna have some basil, okay. So let me show you a couple things about cutting these up. All right, on the basil, a lot of people will kind of curl it all together and then cut it super fine, and this is called a chiffonade. This cut is called a chiffonade, okay? So you can see it's basically like little long pieces, and that's ready to go, okay? And this we're going to add right into our lemon juice because it's all going in together. And then we're going to take the dill, the chervil, and again, parsley wasn't in the recipe, but it looked beautiful in the garden, so I figured, I'll just add a little bit in there. Okay. That's a nice thing about cooking. You can be creative as much as you want, and generally it goes really well. Baking is not the same answer. In baking, you've got to be really tight and really controlled, or else things just won't work. So if you're making a cake and you mismeasure, it might not rise in the oven. Okay, chives. So if you notice, I'm going to take the chives and cut them into a smaller size bundle so it's easier to handle. And then again, you need to cut them as fine as humanly possible. And then if you want, you could run your knife through them one more time just to make sure they're really fine. Okay. Those go in. And we also have half a shallot. Now, some people are much more comfortable with a small knife with the shallot, but I'm not one of them. So, very, very fine, once in the middle, and then again, I'll slow down a little bit. So cut the shallot as fine as humanly possible. Fine, 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 fine. Now, when you get to the end, generally I have to spin it and then just kind of go through it a few times because the end, when the shallot is this small, it's really difficult to cut it into a very fine mince. But so just do your best. And then again, if you need to do this with your knife a few times, no big deal. But what you do need is the shallot to be very fine so you don't have these huge pieces of shallots. Okay.
Chris, we've got another question.
Sure. That's why I'm here.
So this person said that they noticed you were using a copper pot. Does it matter what type of pot that you cook in so that the food stays consistent with the temperature that is used? They've heard that copper pots are said to be or keep heat very well and cook food better.
Yes. In fact, here, come on over here for 1 second, everybody, so that you can see this. See how the vegetables have started to wilt, but they're not quite done yet. I just wanted to make sure you guys saw this. And I'll get back to the copper pot. See how nothing is browning? Okay. I mean, actually, should I have uncovered it? No, I let a lot of steam out, but that's all right. You guys need to see that. Okay. These are Mauviel copper pots. My wife and I, when we were at the college, we would take people to France every year. So for almost 20 years, we took people to France. And then when the trip was over, we would go by ourselves and bop around the country. So I never had a good set of cookware. And so these are solid copper with stainless steel inside. Mauviel, M-A-U-V-I-E-L, probably some of the best copper pots, probably most people agree. And so copper is a superconductor of heat. You saw that these heated up in like no time flat. They've got no hot spots, and they cook really, really evenly. I was just checking the fish. It's working perfectly. So I always have stainless steel inside like these, right? Nothing will stick. I also have non-stick pots, and I also have cast iron. So depending on what you're doing, I choose a different pot for different things. Let's see. I'm making something that I need it to make sure it doesn't stick. I'll use a Teflon or a non-stick pan. In this particular case, I really like these pots because if I wanted to, I could take this pot just like this and throw it right in the oven. So again, depending on what I'm doing, I choose different things. But copper is a superb conductor of heat. The All-Clad brand are also, I hear, very, very good too. And remember, with pots and pans, you get what you pay for. So, okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So what I'm looking at is how much olive oil to lemon juice mixture. This also needs a touch of salt. Okay, just a touch. And that's just a little dry, just a little more olive oil. Okay, great. Okay. Our zucchini has to go in. See, I was busy talking. The timer went off. See? So the zucchini goes in. We'll cover it back up. And now this will be ready in 2 minutes. In fact, let me check the fish because the fish should be just about done. Here, I'll bring it over here so Karen can see much easier. Oh, I almost forgot. I think I said it before we got started. Everyone, my wife Karen is on the working the camera. So everyone, big thumbs up for Karen. Thank you so much, Karen. Big thumbs up. All right, so I'm going to fish. Yep, okay. Basically what I just did was I took a knife and I felt how easy it inserted into the fish, okay? So what you can do if you're really unsure is you can take it out and break open a little bit to make sure that it's opaque all the way through the center. But I can tell just by how the knife feels, because you know I've made a lot of fish, that this is ready to go. Okay, all right. So is that a good answer on the copper pot? Everyone good on the pots? Yeah. Okay. All right. So another thing on our vegetables is, so again, everyone remember, the amount of vegetables I have in here is probably enough for about 3 or 4 people. All right. So you can see I'm moving them around a little bit. And of course, if you're unsure, take a little taste. Okay. 1 more minute. The carrots are done, but see how the zucchini isn't quite cooked enough? So we're going to give this literally 1 more minute, and then it'll be done. Okay. And I need to turn the fish off because another reason I like this fish recipe, everybody, is because I can hold the fish like this for probably a good 10, 15, 20 minutes without a problem. As long as the milk stays hot, your fish is going to stay hot in there. So that's another nice reason to poach, because it can give you some time. Okay. All right. All right. So we're going to, I think a minute is just about up here. All right. We are ready to go. Okay. Now, there's a couple schools of thought. You can make really perfect, beautiful little bundles right next to each other and everything's all lined up beautiful. Sure, no problem. Or I personally kind of like this, how I've got a little bit of everything, but it's got a little bit of what? Artistic angst, if you will. Yeah. my wife is laughing at that one.
Sorry.
My vegetables have artistic angst. All right.
I'm laughing. That's why it's shaking a little bit.
All right. So you need to take anything at all and fish this out. Okay. In fact, hold on one second. I almost forgot. I need a clean paper towel because I don't want to have the liquid dripping all over the place. Okay. All right. Move this so the camera can see better. Okay, so I'm just going to just touch it for a couple seconds. Oh, see how the fish is flaking on the bottom? So there's another little indicator it's done. A little corner just came off where I touched it. So you know the fish is cooked. Okay, now for our sauce. Now it is up to you how you want to do this. So here's what I mean by that. With the sauce, you can go right over the top, okay? You could do little bits around the outside, okay? Me personally, I like to see some of this fish. So I'm going to, on purpose, just put a little bit across the middle, and then I'm going to kind of drizzle it around the outside so that it'll pick up some of that, okay? All right. So for our halibut, there you go. So remember, everyone, we have our halibut and our kale salad. And I was thinking about this, but now I'm not a keto diet expert, but I believe this is probably, and again, I'm sure someone out there would know more than me on because I'm not a keto diet expert, but there's very, very little carbohydrates in this. The butternut squash, I'm not sure if those are the correct type of nuts because I know there's certain type of nuts on a keto diet, but this is should be a relatively, pretty healthy meal. Lots of fresh vegetables, good halibut. So, okay. What other questions may I answer for you all out there? Or did I do such an incredible job that no one has any questions?
Moment to type. We don't have any just yet, but that doesn't mean there aren't some coming.
No problem. So let's see. Substitutions. The kale, you could substitute lettuce, any kind of lettuce if you wanted, but obviously you wouldn't have to massage it. But the kale's got so many good vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. I think it really makes a superb item to use on this. Also, you could have this salad all by itself. As you can see, it's really a pretty good size, healthy salad. You could have this all by itself, or 2 or 3 people could probably split the one that I made right here. Okay. On the halibut. So remember, if you wanted to make it a classic Vierge sauce with tomato in it, you could add like 1 Roma tomato chopped up really fine and add it into the sauce. And it'll be a little bit more faithful to the original version of the Vierge. I personally, I didn't want the tomatoes on here. So even though I'm calling it a Vierge sauce, it's mostly a Vierge sauce because his original sauce is what this is based on. So, okay. All right.
We did get another question and a comment. First, our comment, everything looks delicious. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And our question is, could you use 2% or lactose-free milk, or what could you substitute the whole milk with?
Yes. Okay. So on the milk, the reason that you use whole milk or half and half or cream is the butterfat content. So the butterfat will actually give this fish more of an unctuous, creamy mouthfeel consistency, but there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't use another milk at all. No problem at all. Skim milk, almond milk, soy milk, no problem at all. All the same techniques apply, the same time applies. It's just, it'll have a slightly less buttery mouthfeel when you eat it. Oh, that was it, everybody. I'm sorry, I forgot one more thing. Remember I was saying that we chefs, we hate to waste things. So remember that you've got milk in here that now has probably picked up a little bit of the halibut flavor. So you could use this for a white chowder if you wanted. Look up a recipe. And the recipe, maybe it calls for different vegetables and fish and stuff like that. You could use this as your milk base in that recipe, and it'll work really, really good. So, in fact, you could plan on making this, and then the next day you could make a white chowder or even a corn chowder, and then use that up, and you don't have to waste anything at all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A few more questions that have come in. Is it better to roast vegetables with parchment paper? They have always used nonstick foil.
Okay, the problem with nonstick foil is it usually sticks. That's what I found. It sticks on me all the time. The advantage of parchment paper and silicone baking sheet is this. The silicone baking sheet you buy one time, it's approximately $22, but you literally will use it for years and years and years. Cookies, macaron, vegetables, chicken, fish, anything. It's highly nonstick. You wash it, dry it, put it away, use it again and again and again. Parchment paper, this quality of parchment paper that we have available to us at the stores, like a Jewel, you can use for 3 bakes, and then you generally got to throw it away. If you're baking something sticky on it, like vegetables, then you're probably going to have to throw away after once. But the parchment paper, you would tear it off, use it. But the silicone, if you buy the ones that fit right in the pan, you buy it once, you're done. Literally for years, and you don't have to buy it again. And they work awesome for nonstick. They're fantastic. In fact, when you make macaron, I'm sure a lot of people have had macaron. What I found was a lot of recipes will say bake the macaron on parchment paper, and gosh darn it, half of the time those macarons stick to the parchment. And so when I would teach the students, I would say, never use parchment, always use silicone for macaron, because they will never, ever, ever stick. So.
Great tip. This is about the soup you mentioned earlier on in the program. So the soup you mentioned earlier, do you have recommended ratios? And then
yeah, I can give you a really basic, okay, you ready? 1 butternut squash, and do what I just did with it, remove the seeds and the outside and just chop it up, because you're going to put it in a blender anyway, so just chop it up. 1 small cauliflower, 2 good-sized potatoes, like a normal brown russet potato, about that big, and 1 32-ounce container of chicken stock. I personally like the organic chicken stock that you could buy at the store, because for 99% of what I'm doing, it works awesome and it tastes really good. So you put those together, a little salt and pepper, cook it on the stove for 45 minutes, bring it to a boil, simmer for 45 minutes, remove it, put it in the blender, remove it from the blender, and then if you wanted to add a little cream, 6-8 ounces, no problem. If not, you want a little more dietetic, no problem. A little nutmeg also. Don't add too much nutmeg, because nutmeg is one of those spices that when you use it, if you use too much, everything tastes like nutmeg. So just use it sparingly, little salt, little pepper. And those ratios will be really, really darn close to make an awesome butternut squash soup.
Perfect for this weather that's coming up.
Yes. In fact, that's what I'm doing with all my leftover butternut squash soup. I have a cauliflower in the fridge that I bought. I was like, oh, am I going to make this tomorrow?
Another question. What was the spice that you mentioned at the beginning?
The spice. Oh, the type of salt, was it?
Fleur de sel.
Was it the type of salt? Probably. It probably was salt.
Response.
Fleur, F-L-E-U-R. In fact, here, I can grab a bag. Fleur de sel. This right here is I buy it by the 8-ounce bag. Fleur de sel Guérande. So if it just says Fleur de sel, then that's the type that we're talking about. It is a type of sea salt. It's like extremely high quality sea salt. It's very white in color. It's not gray, but it's got a superb flavor. And you can see this is called a salt pig that you keep salt in, and you literally just work right out of it. So you can buy these. This one, I believe, is a meal en riz, and keep my salt in it right next to the stove at all times. I believe it was the salt. I think that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, they were asking about what you used in the salad, and I think that was
in the salad. Oh, in the salad was the apple cider vinegar. I mean the dressing, because that was the dressing. Dijon mustard, the salt, apple cider vinegar, olive oil, and maple syrup.
perfect.
Right. Yeah, and that's in the recipe too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Our next question is about how do you pick a good halibut at the store?
Excellent question. Okay. They brought the halibut in just for me because they said, hey, I'm doing this video shoot for Schomburg Library. And they're like, we'll bring in some. Okay, thank you. So if you don't have that option, what you want to do is look at, if possible, the bloodline on the fish. Here's what I mean by that. When you look at fish, there's the bloodlines, literally the blood that runs through the body. When you see a fillet of fish in the case and the bloodline, the blood is this color. It's a bright, bright, bright red. That is a very, very fresh piece of fish. What happens is the bloodlines get darker and darker and darker. And so the fish is getting older and older and older. So with the halibut, it's a little bit of a problem because it's a flat fish and it's not constructed the same way because they cut all of that away. And so you have to look to see how bright the color of the fish is. It's very hard to quantify. It'll look like Chilean sea bass when it gets older. Everyone's seen Chilean sea bass, which kind of looks like this in its raw state. Chilean sea bass looks just like this. It has that opaque white color. And so you want to look for a translucency. And also you just flat out ask your fishmonger behind the counter, hey, when did that halibut come in? And you could also ask to smell it. I'm sure they'll probably let you. Because remember, if a fish smells like fish, it is not fresh.
All right. Last call for questions. If you have any additional ones, I'll give you a moment to type. But thank you so much, Chris. This was wonderful. It's such a pleasure to be with you in your kitchen. It's a more intimate experience. So yeah, someone would like to know what's for dessert.
Well, let me see. Actually, that's a good question, and here's why. My wife and I are members of the Alliance Française of DuPage County. She is the president of the chapter, and I do Zoom cooking lessons for the chapter once a month. This Saturday, I am making a French apple rustic butter cake. It's essentially a cake batter, a simple cake batter that you put together in a mixer. And you fold in Honeycrisp apples. You could use Fuji's, Braeburns, or Honeycrisp. But again, in this case, I like how the Honeycrisp are. I par bake the Honeycrisp apples for 30 minutes in the oven so to release some of the moisture. Put it all in a springform pan, bake it. And 1 hour later, you've got this awesome, simple cake that is just made with sugar and butter and flour and apples in a springform pan. And you literally, if you're quick and you measure everything quickly, you could literally get this cake in the oven in about 10 minutes. There's only like 5 ingredients. Probably the most time-consuming part is preparing the springform pan with the parchment liner so it doesn't stick. So that's what's for dessert. So
we have one final question. What wine would you pair this meal with?
What wine? Well, hopefully I'm not going to embarrass her. My wife is a certified specialist of wine. And she also is a level 1 sommelier. So she has 2 different classes, certifications in wine. So Karen, what would you pair this meal with? She is a
The
Bonafide
kale
expert.
salad is difficult. Sometimes leafy green vegetables are very difficult to pair. But for the entire meal, I would say a dry Sauvignon Blanc would be a very, very good pairing for both dishes.
Do you have any Sauvignon Blancs that you prefer over others, Karen?
I would say a Sancerre from
France.
France.
Okay. See?
There we go. 2 experts for the price of 1. The last question, what group are you making the cake for? They want to know again.
Oh, it's
Wow.
the Alliance in English, but it's pronounced Alliance. We both speak French. Alliance Française, Francaise, Française of DuPage County. So if you just Googled Alliance Française DuPage County, the website will pop up. So,
There are 3 different alliances
Yeah.
in Chicago.
Right, there's
Chicago, North Shore, and DuPage.
right, North Shore, Chicago, and DuPage County. So, right, and we are members, and she's the president of the Alliance Française DuPage County.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, everyone. And thank you, Chris, for teaching us all of these wonderful tips, tricks, and quite a tasty looking meal. And we hope to see you all back again soon. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks very much. Annie, thank you so much for hosting. It's awesome to be here with you all. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care.
Okay.